Welcome to the Enchoris podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing insight to what happens in the German landscape for everyone living outside Germany. And today's guest is Ralph Christoph, the director of the CNB convention, the creative industry part of the CO Pop convention. How would you correct me?
It's the CO Pop convention.
It's the CO Pop convention.
Yeah.
Over the years, the titles have changed.
True.
My bad. We just talked about how titles switch and how branding and the whole design of a conference switches over the years. So here we are. Sorry for the mistake. Welcome.
All good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking time while preparing this year's version of the festival. So it's a great opportunity. The goal in inviting you was to talk about sustainability. Mainly, there was a very interesting panel last year. And as always, the podcast format allows room to talk in depth about all the things that wouldn't have time in a conference or in a public event. So this is an opportunity to talk about how we can make the arts more sustainable, not as a buzzword, but as a meaningful, sustainable way to move forward and actually be an example for other industries. So that was the goal for today. And before that, I would like to ask you, what is the main vibe for this year's festival? What's cooking at CO Pop?
Well, the event is not an island. We are part of a general state of what's going on in society. And we all know there has been better times than these days. So, of course, we are also reflecting this situation. On the other hand, we try to think and be positive in a way because we are representing pop culture, and pop culture is partly positive thinking. So it's both. It's reflecting what's going on right now, and it's also giving people a good time.
I think that was what's after the Second World War. Film and pop music were both awareness and a little bit of healthy denial to cope with the weight of things. And I think that's what pop by design has to be, a relaxed way to feel the soul while it might be raining bombs or while we might be at dead ends with business models or societal approaches that we reach the end of a phase in society. It's a dark time, and I think our job as entrepreneurs, artists, choose your word, is to keep a positive view and keep going, because all those things like art and music are unnecessary for some people, but they keep society going and they keep people's hearts and minds open in dark times. So interesting that's part of the planning, and inevitably, how can you make a record or a convention without feeling what's around you? So very interesting. Let's go directly to CO Pop, and I wanted to talk about how much a festival. We were talking with Soundtrack Alone on the last episode of the podcast, and one of the interesting things that came up was how much of a community aspect the festival builds up. Have you noticed that over the years, that a festival can create a sense of community among artists, producers, that it becomes a reference point, that is more of a social hub than an event in itself?
Absolutely. There has been a time where we defined ourselves as the festival of festivals, but also the festival for artists, which is like a very big word, But as you said, we always try that not only our visitors, the audience, but also the people on stage have a good time in the festival area. I mean, a lot of festivals say this. Meanwhile, it's like, I think you have to provide that for artists anyway. Otherwise, they won't play your festival. But as we are a different kind of event compared to other classical festivals, like pop cultural festivals on the green side, somewhere outside where you probably go there for 2 or 3 days, sleeping on the ground of the festival, etc., etc. We are an urban event, so it's a bit different. So the narrative is a bit different, of course. When it comes to the convention, it's a bit clearer because we really want our visitors to exchange, to mingle on eye level. That's our main purpose, so to say. It's not just like come and make business or come and give your speech and whatever. That's all that is important, of course. But it's more like a meeting point, a marketplace in a sense of meeting, in a sense of get together, in sense of exchange, knowledge, opinions, etc., etc. So that's actually what we want to provide.
That became more and more important after Corona and the shock we all had, and it's also really important for younger people. We did a study in München on the effect of the club culture on younger people last year, and the effect of the lack of public space, meeting points, a place where you don't need to consume, but where you participate, you engage. It becomes more and more important unless we all want to isolate at home with our streaming services and it becomes less humane. So it is more important. And artists, most people think that they're on tour or with people. They're some of the most lonely people they are because they spend time in hotels away from the people they love. So when you go back to a venue or a festival where you had connected with people, you always look forward to that. When I was touring, I remember the bouncers of certain places because you go there and they're like, oh, you're back. And it kind of feels like home when you're away from home. And that feeling is something that translates on stage. You stay after the show, you talk to people. It has a different quality. So providing that vibe is actually being a good host for the music to happen or for the event to happen. So the post-corona effect of events, I think they're more essential than ever. And if people think we can't do business because we'll reach people online, no one's going to make a sale at the festival, but you're going to meet a couple of people, hopefully with shared values or with a meaningful context, and then you build up an idea or things happen. And I've never had that over social media. You might get introduced, but it's like online dating. I made that joke. People do it, but doesn't mean that's...
Absolutely. But if you go into that more detail, because to speak about post-corona effects, I think we have now a layer of effects. It's not just one effect. The main effect was, of course, people were not allowed to meet in public for a significant time. And that was, for different age groups, a different experience, of course. But now we are suffering from like waves of effects of, and we see every year we see something new coming up out of that. I mean, everything is analyzed and we have studies on that and what the cause and effect and everything, But what do we do with that information? I think that's the main question. What does it mean for the infrastructure? What does it mean for artists? What does it mean for the ecosystem of the music industry? What does it mean for the audience? So there's so many different aspects since the pandemic ended, which is already like 2 years ago. It's so difficult to...
It's 3 years ago. It feels like a month or 20 years ago.
Exactly. You're completely right, depending on how we look on the effects and on that time. So I think what we are facing right now is like multiple effects, because even though we know what we have to improve for the sector, something new is coming up, like, okay, there's a war, or there's a new government, or there's a new whatever,
Sanctions, visas get harder, traveling gets difficult. It's a really complicated.
It's super complicated, and it's not like, maybe it was never easy, but the problems of the sector were totally different. It was like more like, okay, can I pay enough money for artist A to perform at my festival? That was like the main struggle, or is there someone who's offering more money and then he or her is just playing somewhere else? Nowadays, it's much more complicated.
It's like the old thing where a small cafe used to have prices people can afford, and now it has to fight gentrification and the venue being sold or the building being sold for development. So it's like a small cafe or a small music venue has to face investors. So we live in a more complicated and interconnected world, which has the negative effect that the political and economical structures are more violent. But on the other hand, we have more of an effect as people and artists because everything's interrelated. It's not in its own bubble. So there's two sides to every dynamic. But I think what you're saying is really interesting from the perspective that I'll take the example of touring. The amount of artists that will not go to the US or the UK and how that destabilizes touring, how people put more pressure to come to Europe. So I think in a way Europe is becoming the dream place to perform at the moment for people because there's still support, there's the infrastructure is supported to a degree by the state, which is not enough in my view, but it's not simply a venue that has to make ends meet with no support. So we are at an interesting point. I was talking with friends and we were talking like in the past you would dream about touring in the States, and Europe is becoming the diverse place where touring becomes more interesting, different languages, different people, venues where appreciation for the art in itself. So it's a really interesting switch, and I think the convention is in the middle of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a proof of how a union like the European Union can work in a positive way. I mean, the way of free traveling, that's the foundation of that you can tour within Europe. I mean, and we see if you cut that off, like with Brexit and the UK, these markets are totally disconnected. It's not affordable for a Central European artist to perform in the UK, even though you get funds from your local export office, whatever. It's like super complicated, yeah, and also vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in the market say, "Oh, we are missing the British bands," because, in a way.
They reduced performing to 20-30% of what they used to do, and they go to exponentially bigger venues, which again is a different experience, and it cuts off any up-and-coming, interesting or established band that has not reached popular. So basically you kill diversity, and the people who can afford to come are not the bands you would like to see growing. And the UK always had a really interesting effect on European culture, ranging from the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Absolutely.
And not everybody's going to reach K-Tempest level, so they can come over and we can see that happening. So it's really, I think it leads to a form of conformity artistically. Nothing against popular acts. People are talented and wonderful, but it becomes less possible to travel, simply the costs of touring in the past years.
It's mainly the costs, I would say so. It's not the taste of people and what they are willing and able to pay for. It's really like, we have, but even though we are missing like 20 or 30% of British acts touring in mainland Europe, we have still too many bands on tour for the capacity and for the amount of money that is in the market, right? I mean, that's the story we've been told. Music is now available and accessible everywhere. Isn't that fantastic? Yeah, but what does it mean? That doesn't mean that you now can easily tour in Norway only because your music is available in Norway. I mean, just a simple thing. You might have a lot of fans in Norway, maybe, but that doesn't make it easier to tour in Norway, because the problems keep the same, I mean, costs are everywhere rising, everywhere. It's not a German thing It's not a single market thing. It's actually a global thing at the end of the day. And so that makes it much more difficult. And plus the effects of post-corona time, that people had to postpone their tours and postpone their album. And they are also coming in the same wave with the next band and the next album. So it's really, really difficult to get attention by the audience. It's a very tough, competitive situation nowadays.
Both on the booking front, both on the
both sides, yeah.
Radio,
and of course through the platforms as well, because you're not. I mean, you can upload everything, but you are not. You are not in the position to make your content visible or not. You know, it's like
it's lost in an ocean of information.
Yeah, and you're not controlling the algorithms. You know, that's another really important thing. So, yeah, we are just like, you know, pop culture used to be like, you don't need funds, you know, because you're making money in any way. You know, I heard that so many times, even nowadays, from certain ministries and people working there, very, very old-fashioned and really not. This is not existing anymore. This kind of model, you know, at least 10 or 15 years. That's gone.
I always make the joke that I ask people, when was the last time they bought a record? And people who don't listen to music on vinyl look at me like, well, it's been a while. So,
True.
and if we go back to the 90s, the probability that someone had a CD in his case or a CD player, if he was between 15 and 30, was 95%. That means he did a purchase probably in the last month.
Yeah.
So the whole business model has changed, and the narrative is that if something is successful, it will work without looking at the proportions and the costs of the industry.
Yeah, I would even go a step further, saying, because this is the third change we see in the industry. The first one was like back in the days, it was like touring was to promote your album, right? Then the second, the turn was touring was to make money. You have to release an album to be on tour. That was the reason to be on tour. And then making money with the touring. And nowadays you do neither money with the product nor with the tour, you know. Except you are like, you know, on a level which is like, you know.
And even the third part, sync, which would be like let the marketing industry get your song on a car commercial, is now not really what it used to be.
And it was never that big in
Exactly.
Europe that it was in the United States, where you even have like, you know, sync models for the trailer music and not only for the final film score, you know. So that's like it's Disneyland for sync, you know. And as in Germany, as we have this GEMA-Rahmenvertrag for everything which is broadcasted in the public TV or radio, that's not that much money in the game, right? And the German film itself is too small to make, you know, a lot of money for a lot of people, you know. So, yeah, it's, you know, the cake is getting smaller and smaller, and as more and more people come to the table.
It's very hard for people to understand proportions. And simple things like if you have a band and they all pay their health insurance, you get to a sum every month. And if you look at tickets, and so it was always a struggle to do music, but people stick to certain narratives, or they watch the 100 top artists of the world who fill stadiums, or which is the trend at the moment, those mega events. And for people in politics, like if someone can fill a stadium with 80,000 people, well, that makes money. There are things that work, but that are less than 1% of what is out there in the industry, in the ecosystem.
And as said in the beginning, I mean, our industry is a mirror of society. You know, there was recently a very interesting study. It's not a study. It's like a a piece where you can see who owns what in the industry, especially when it comes to ticketing and live events. And at the end, just to break it down, it's like six old white guys own 95% of the global business, right? And it's a bit like the mirror in the digital world as well, you know. So we have market concentration at the end of the day, people controlling a huge amount of money. And let's say everyone else, like the newcomers, the up-and-coming artists, whatever you name it, that's like a tiny little bit of the share in the market. So, and coming back to CO Pop is like we feel responsible for that part of the industry, for the tiny little bit, you know. For the young ones, for the local ones as well, regional ones, also international ones, but for that part of the industry, we feel responsible. That's actually why we do it, yeah. And so it has no big impact on neither the Spotify algorithm nor the Live Nation shareholder value, but nonetheless, we are part of that huge ecosystem.
It's important. Democracy is like that. We have to serve the interests of the last minority for society to be healthy. It's not just about majorities. It's about every part of an ecosystem being treated in a way that its needs are at least taken into consideration if we want to have a healthy society. Yeah. And an industry is exactly the same way. It cannot only be about profit. And very often, even the young bands and the people who do the work, they create a narrative that then becomes popular. And so you cannot operate without grassroots.
Absolutely not. And we still have a very powerful tool, so to say, because I mean, that's the good thing about music and popular music is you can reach so many people, you know, with that no other art can reach, you know. I mean, you not only have to speak about Taylor Swift, but you can also speak about much smaller artists, you know. And if you have a good relationship with your audience, they are truly dedicated to your work. They follow you. They are stable followers, you know, and they are multipliers of whatever, you know, you put in, you know. I think that's very, very important, you know, as a voice, as a true voice of everything else than daily politics and narratives, you know. So pop music, popular music, pop culture is super important, more than ever.
I agree. It's also a part of how we heal and we connect. And it's something that people, like you said, you take an artist with for 20 years in your life and you buy the record for their 10th record, not because you expect them to have the same ground-breaking event effect they had on the second one, but because it means something to you and it means to a community of people. I was in Brussels a couple of months ago. I saw Dirty Three, and I had seen that band back in 2007 in Athens. And I looked at the audience and I felt exactly the same thing. People from 20 to 70 in both venues and the same vibe. And that was like 19 years apart. Mm-hmm. And I took a friend and I told him, this is going to be special. And it's not about the music. It's just about that an artist for me, the definition of an artist is an artist who gets the audience that fits them, which is also very often when someone becomes too popular or less popular than they deserve, that the wrong audience shows up. Mm. But when a band has that connection, you go to a concert and you feel like that's really special. And I know that words don't do this justice. I know how that sounds, what I'm saying. It's not tangible when you explain it, but when you're in the room, you feel it. And I think that's a very deep healing ritual we have in society, as abstract as that sounds. And then you walk on the street with your headphones and you feel connected to people in times where you're isolated. And you know that all those people who were at that concert are somewhere out there having a similar experience, similar problems, worrying about society, war, prices, whether the child gets a spot at school, all those things we all struggle with. But that it's like a glue. And you remember what you were listening to when you were 20 or 18, or people who retire and then go back to their favorite records and spend their first year of retirement listening to that. So there's beauty in all that. So I think society has an awareness now how important music, pop music, indie music, fringe music, experimental music, all those things are an important part, which brings me to the core of what I wanted to discuss with you. How, with all the political and economical constraints we have, so the problem cannot be solved without solving the problem in society. What can we do in this industry to actually be a role model for sustainability, and just like art does in general, give society an idea of, okay, despite the hardship, despite the problems, despite art not being the most profitable thing in society, how can we be and do things better? So that's what I'm really interested to go a little deeper, and it ranges from how did things change in the last 20 years. That would be my first question. What do you think were the first milestones in this direction?
I think it's we have to look differently on this question, because on the one hand we should talk about the industry itself. I mean, because we are, as a company, we have employees, we have a classical company structure, but are we a good company, so to say? You know, what do we have to do that people like to work with us or at our company? That question everyone should ask himself, herself, itself. And it doesn't matter if it's the CO Pop or if it's Universal Records. It's the same question, actually. And speaking about that, things have changed for the better. I wouldn't say for good, but for the better. The change process is definitely there. Speaking about awareness, speaking about diversity, speaking about gender balance, companies, we are not there yet. Definitely not, But things have, there's a process going on. And maybe within that industry, a bit more stronger than in other industries. That's the one part. The other part is how to use the output, like the content, to be a strong voice in this or that direction. I mean, if an artist raises his or her voice for climate change, then it's an impact, definitely. Or, against war or whatever, there's a strong impact. I mean, we have a strong political impact right now. I mean, it's not easy, There's certain areas of politics on stages which I don't agree, because it's really, really difficult to promote things from stage to an audience, That's a very
it's a very nuanced thing, how political and how militant you get, and where the point where it's almost pedantic, or
absolutely,
to put it mildly. It's just, I'm trying to contextualize that we all, for lack of better term, we all sense when something goes too far. I think we know it in our body, and that limit is different for every artist. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to, because I think you're saying something that is extremely nuanced and very difficult to pinpoint within the limits of public speech and political correctness. I mean that in a good way, that we actually have to be civil and respect everyone, not as a conformity mechanism.
But speaking about that aspect, we can see it also in other arts sectors, and not only in the popular music. So
absolutely.
That's. But I wanted to say is the power which is behind that. We can see it as well. There's a strong power, and that is actually conflicting with the political agenda, which is very popular everywhere. I mean, not speaking about only the United States, but also how we react on that crazy guy is like making the pace, and everyone is saying, okay, we have to be fine with him, otherwise this and that, So if it's Italy or France or Germany, it's all the same, So it's super important that we as a culture, as an industry, keep an eye on the important topics and keep the finger in the wound, because climate change is not disappearing because politics say it's disappearing, It's and so we have a couple of other topics which are still super necessary to talk about, and that's what we try to do, to give these voices a forum, a stage,
It's actually balancing out the popular narrative by adding the whole spectrum of the argument, because mainstream media, at the moment, one of the biggest problems in society is how journalism is basically controlled or not done objectively, as objective as you can be. But art, journalism, and activism in general there were never more journalists dead. To talk about another part of society, where we get our news, how things work. So for me, it's very important to get back to the point where we have a balanced situation ranging from subculture to mainstream. And I think a conference like CO-Pop, in a way, intuitively tries to act to the popular narrative, provide balance, and keep meaningful voices over the years. Give them a stage.
That would be the perfect picture, actually. True. It not always works out like that, but we try our best, of course. Additionally to that, we try to attract different age groups, and different age groups need different, programs and different ways of talking about special topics.
That is very interesting. May I interrupt you? Because that's a thought I had last year when I was at the conference. How conscious do you plan? I look at it from a service design perspective. For example, I have a 18 to 25-year-old musician in the formative years, up and coming, and you have an industry expert who comes to the conference. I always find it hard to create a schedule that accommodates both people. It's almost like a different journey through the conference. And how much do you bring those people together? How much thought goes into creating a schedule with that in mind, that you have different generations of people? The typical effect in conference is the people who came the past 20 years.
That's the secret ingredient.
Spill the beans.
Yeah, true. Well, first of all, it's nonetheless which topic you are talking about or addressing. You have to take a step back and speak to people who are really into that. And it doesn't matter which topic it is. If it's like streaming, you should speak to people who are really into that business. If you talk about barriers in the industry, same. So always the point of view is really important, It's not like me telling them how to do it. It's like bringing people in who are really affected by that special topic. So that's one thing. Curation. Secondly, it's not about I know how it works, and I tell you how to do it, That's the old traditional way of conferences, so to say. And the old meaning of, okay, the more popular or prominent the speaking person is, the better it is for the audience. It's not the case anymore, To modeling something like there's always new people coming up, It's like in school, As every year there's a new fifth degree, you move up until you leave school, And that's the same with conferences. As every year is new people coming in, And it's not like that they only are listeners, they also have something to say, and then to find the right people which have to contribute something to a conference in a way. And the thing is, the younger the people you're addressing, you have to really, really sensitive about, 2 years is a lot, It's a huge difference if you addressing 16-year-old or 18-year-old people. It's a huge difference, And the big narrative like, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, to put in one pot, that's, this is something totally different, totally. And it's a lot of work to deep dive into that audiences and to find out what is really important to them and how they want to be addressed. So, and of course that cannot be done by myself alone, because you need people from that age group to give you input for that. That's the simple thing, So you have to listen to a lot of people. So what we do is we invite regularly, we call it's the 5 under 21, but it's different age groups. We have like 16-year-old, 70-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 21-year-old people who are invited to our office, and we interview them. We ask them simple things like, where do you consume music, for instance? But also a lot of other things which are super interesting, how much time you spend on your mobile phone, which apps do you use? Are you going to theaters? What sports do you like? And so on and so on. Endless questions, actually, but always related to music at the end of the day. And you get a bigger and bigger and bigger picture, and then maybe you find out that some age groups are not really into concerts anymore, or are not into Spotify anymore, or whatever, And knowing that, then you can create a program and a situation which is comfortable at the end of the day for different groups, And because you ask, there is no thing in 2 days where you can make everyone happy, But like, to break it down, I would say the older and more professional conference goers are, the less they go into rooms and sit there and listen to something, I think they come because they want to see what the young ones are talking about, because it's also important for their business at the end of the day. They themselves, they connect with each others,
Networking, mainly.
They go for lunch or for dinner.
Absolutely.
And whatever, But that's fine, So that's how it works, The bigger problem is for the first movers, how to teach them. Maybe teach is the wrong word, but to give them an idea what is a conference actually. Because if you are a school kid or just a student, maybe what a concert is and what a cool bar in Cologne is and where's the cheapest kebab and this and that. But a conference is something different, because you have to pay money for it to get in, And the first question is, why should I pay, even if it's a cheap ticket with CO Pop Convention, why should I pay 50 euro for what? What do I get for this 50 euro? And if you tell these first movers a lot of connections and a lot of knowledge, you say, well, I go to university anyway, and I'm listening to podcasts, and I read the newspaper. Why should I pay 50 euro on top of that consumption package I have already? That is the main issue for us, to explain to these groups why it's a good thing to come and what is the benefit you can take out of that.
While you talk, I realize after someone listens to you, it sounds obvious, but I'm surprised with a school comment, because I had a picture the whole time you were talking. Imagine if for 20 years everybody who came to school stayed there and came every year, and you had 20 years of people coming to the school theater to talk about something. That's a very, very diverse set of people, and it's an impossible crowd to please.
True.
So I think it's very interesting that you try to get the pulse of every generation and try to see how people use things, how people. It requires a basic understanding of different streams of how people navigate consumption for music, their habits, their profile. And I think what is really interesting is also, how do I address people? How do I address 20 segments that have different attitudes and different... I know it sounds obvious, but since this talk is not prepared, I never thought about differences among people, just like in the school context. The young kings mix with the older kids, or the college kids find the young people uncool. So if you go down that analogy, you see how impossible the task is. And you see also that it's a form of education in a way. How do I socialize? Why do I go to an event? How do I present myself? And since we want people to become professional in this industry and actually make a living, provide value, it's an important part of their professional education. So in a way, it almost becomes a form of socially engineered education, like you would in another context. And since the industry is spread, you go to a studio, you go to a venue, go to a label, you go to a publicist. It's not like it's a pharmaceutical company that has departments and you know where you are in the company, but you have to navigate that as an individual or a freelancer. So it's a far more complicated process for someone to learn how to navigate.
Exactly. And we have like two different audiences. The one is the consuming audience, which probably doesn't have to care about what's behind that industry. And the others are, okay, there's an industry. How does it work actually? We have recording, we have publishing, we have management, we have touring, we have licenses, etc., etc. We have metadata. What is that? To understand, the value of music, which is behind that, But what they see is like, as let's say Gen Alpha. I mean, they grew up with, everything's available and it costs nothing. Because whether you as a parent pay for the Spotify account or it's a free account, whatever.
The freemium economy.
Or the freemium economy. That's how they grew up, And then they maybe read about what Taylor Swift tour made $1 billion. Well, she must be fucking rich, right? Yes. But not everyone is Taylor Swift, you know. And to understand the value of music, the value of art, that's something we cannot provide. That's too big, That's way too big. But we can empower those ones who want to get into the industry to understand much better how it works and where are the problems and the critical attempts in that industry, Because back in the days it was quite easy, Artist, contract, make a record, 5-record deal, a lot of advances, you get money for that, you buy a car, a house, whatever, you go on tour, that's it, easy. Well, it's not that simple anymore,
And even back then, that didn't apply to everyone. It was a very closed system because it's idealized. But if you look at the numbers of records that were printed back then,
of course,
ironically, we have more and more vinyl pressing plants than we had in the past. It gets to the paradox that it's growing with a degree that is eventually not sustainable for...
Yeah, and even though back in the days, artists get more cheated than maybe nowadays, they still get cheated, but in a different way.
For younger people listening to this, there were times where you would get 0.1 on a CD, and that was a good deal. Yeah. And it's not very different from the dispute on what you get on Spotify. It's just exponentially worse due to the nature of the business model of how things work at the moment.
Absolutely.
Now it's 0.00005. So that's for a listen of a song. Yeah. Inevitably, from what you describe, you get to see how people change what's clear for me is your interest in people and what drives them, how they think. So inevitably, working in the conference for so many years, and you were a club owner earlier, if I remember correctly. What changes have you experienced from your perspective by watching so many different trends going on in the last 20 years? What left a mark on you as far as changes or surprised you? That was a complicated question.
That is really a complicated and a very complex question. Being in that, let's say, game for such a long time, it keeps me more relaxed to see that I know things come and go, trends come and go. We've seen things before. I mean, that's in fashion, in music, Now indie is back, and, the fashion from the early 90s is back, and so on and so on. I mean, that was always the case. So that makes it a bit more relaxed to see, there's nothing falling down from Mars and revolutionizing everything. So it's not going to happen like this. But still, though, it makes me feel really happy and feel good to see that there are still so many people with the same vibe, with the same way of working, and also to see how they develop, that's something that makes me really happy, to see people starting out maybe as an intern one day, and then to see how they develop themselves, over 10, 15 years, and where they go to. Super interesting to see, also in the history of CO Pop, people who been with us in the very early days, where are they now? Super interesting. And it creates an own network of itself, over 20, 25 years. That's a really good network,
And CO Pop did a few cool things before the South by Southwest effect happened, that the city was integrated in interesting ways. You've tried different things over the years. I mean, the city as a city, not as the people who are elected. I'm talking about Cologne. Cologne is for those who are listening who don't live in Cologne. Cologne is the place where you want to go to the weirdest concert, and it's sold out. When you thought there's no way that concert is sold out, and then you're like, oh, it's sold out. So it's an impossible city to predict as a booker, and that's not the case for every city. So Cologne is really interesting. You could go to something that you would expect has sold out months ago, and it's empty because 3 interesting bands play the city on the same day. So the festival had a very interesting effect because Cologne was, I can say that it was the main hub for music in Germany, and Hamburg and Berlin have gotten more traction, or Munich has become its own situation. So it's interesting how the city and the vibe of a city in Europe, Berlin became really a spot where people congregated to very fast. A lot of companies, people left. I actually came to Cologne around 2010, where a lot of things were leaving. So it's interesting how the conference has navigated that. And what I wanted to say with the South by Southwest is like, that's a festival that tried to integrate the city a lot. And I think Cologne is a city where people are integrated in those processes by default due to the tradition of the city. So what makes Cologne special?
The question of all questions.
For someone who runs an event for so many years.
There's a lot of things to complain about Cologne, which are the same metal but a different side, I mean, there's a lot of things which only work for good because they also work for bad, if you know what I mean. It's like, I'll give you one example. A lot of people from, let's say, party people from the mid to end 2000s complain about the good old days. Oh, all the clubs are gone. We went to this place and that place and that place and that place, and it's all gone. They destroyed everything. It was so good back then. And I would say, yeah, but who cares, because the nowadays generation has their own places, and that's important for them. Who cares what was in 2010? Or if I complain about a place which is not existing, but what was great in 1995, Mm-hmm. So that's something I would say when I look on the long tail, how we developed from, let's say, the late 80s till now, we did for good on a long tail. It's like like a market share, We were not like, we didn't have hypes like Berlin, but we were in a long tail, ups and downs, but on the long tail, we made it a 2 or 3% win, I would say, you know what I mean? We lost a lot of good places, but we had new places, and
it's a great city to live, objectively.
Absolutely. And it's interesting when I discuss that with people, especially from the art sector. There is a small tendency, a massive, or not a massive, but there's a up and coming, a growing anti-Berlin sentiment. Because, everyone is in a bad mood there. The weather is shit. Yeah. No one has money, etc., etc.
It's also when something becomes so mainstream, it's a normal thing that there's a reactionary movement against it. Like,
true. And then some actions around the Art Cologne, people said, oh, it's still nice here. I haven't been here for, let's say, 10, 15 years. And that was the same effect we had with CO Pop, that after the pandemic, because we've been in the lucky position being one of the first events being allowed to happen in public again in April in 2022. A lot of people from the outside used that possibility to come, mm-hmm. and then realized, oh, that's quite nice. They still had the old Popcom narrative in their heads. Yeah, we're hanging around there, blah, blah, blah. And, the good old days and this and that. And CO Pop was never like that. Mm-hmm. Then they came and they realized, wow, it's nice. It's different, but it's super nice. It works. And the city is good. People are nice. The taxi drivers don't shout at you. The food is affordable. There's a lot of good bars and other cultural events. Nice. We like it. And they came back for the next year and the next year. And they told other people that it was good, So it's
created a new wave.
A new way for a new narrative that Cologne is a good city for making a music festival and a convention. So
I think that was the direction I was going, that there doesn't need to be a huge hype around something for it to be sustainable. And it's just like with gentrification in cities. If something grows at the normal rate, venues close, venues open, new concepts, and people love the past because it's usually related to their youth.
True. And fair enough,
It's a human bias. It's like we didn't have the same obligations when we were 18 as we do now.
Absolutely not.
And I always say to people who have kids, how often do you go out to complain that there's no clubs? Because it changes. It changes with the needs of people, and so.
But nonetheless, sorry to interrupt you. But nonetheless, there's a huge need of that we are fighting for what we have, and that's what we do as well. But we also use our influence as we are like an institution, so to say. If we like it or not, we are. And as an institution, you also get asked if there's a problem, and you have influence. You run into more open doors than, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago. So if there is a huge question, CO Pop is also often asked for an opinion or for, and so we can also use our, I wouldn't say power, but our, let's say, as the power as an institution to try to make things better,
We have to lobby in the right direction, and lobby is not only for corporate sponsoring. No, It's also communities and associations and unions. And that's what it's a requirement for a democracy to work.
But in the ear of people, lobbying has a
Negative
a negative connotation, right? So, but you're completely right. We are lobbying our interests, and our interest means everything we talked about the last 30 minutes. That's our interest, and we put everything we have on the table to keep things going on, and provide the good things. But knowing how things are, things are coming and going. But the big picture is we went for the better, I would say. If someone asks how has Cologne developed over the years, it went for the better.
I think your view is more objective because you're trying to see it as an evolving ecosystem and not compared to someone who shares his personal experience due to his lifestyle, his changes. So the perspective you're offering is like almost like how does this ecosystem evolve over the years? What changed? What are different groups of people and different groups of audiences need? So it's a completely more objective than my subjective opinion of how my life was 20 years ago in a city. So it's important to have a structural view of it. And I think that influences in the end what a system needs and what makes it sustainable.
But at the end, it goes hand in hand with my subjective opinion on the city, because I loved this city. And me and the other founder of Siopop, Norbert, we were truly Cologne lovers always, especially in the hard times. It's like with your football club you love, you go for good and for bad, it's not a choice, If this team is playing second league, it plays second league. So, and you cannot say, okay, now I just close that door. Some people can, but I can't. And so it's with the city, As everyone was moving to Berlin, we said, no, we stay. We keep staying, and we do with that what we have. We try to create something new. And me personally, I could never live in Berlin. It was a very early decision to say, if I look at Cologne, the good and the bad things, it was always more good than bad things. And as someone who traveled a lot in life, it is a perfect destination. It's a perfect destination, much better than Berlin, even nowadays. Traveling from Berlin is insane. Traveling to Berlin is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So Cologne is perfect. As you said in the beginning. Because we are located in the very center of Europe, with very close to the Western states like France and Benelux, and you can go by train to London. Imagine that. And so on and so on. So it's a perfect place to reach out to.
It was always a great point for touring.
True.
It's almost impossible for any act to avoid Cologne.
Yeah, exactly.
In their schedule. Also, the geography of it. And NRV also had a very interesting role in the post-Second World War cultural development of Europe. So we're kind of in the silent capital of what influenced pop culture, even things like jazz, how Germany and NRV specifically supported jazz artists from the States, how many people found an audience here while they didn't have a business model in the States. It's a really unique thing that gets lost because we all think through the marketing of the big labels and the stories they say. But what keeps artists touring is very different from what the popular narrative of the audience is.
Absolutely. But as you mentioned, jazz is not that dependent on the major industry or industry in general, let's say, city-wise, because it's still it's a mainly performing art, and we have that infrastructure here because there was a lot of money put into that infrastructure for good. So Cologne is definitely the jazz capital, I would say. But we are not the pop capital. We are like in the shadow of the others a little bit. And especially, it's in every kind of music genre is the same, but in popular culture maybe a bit even bigger. There's no boundaries for that. It's nonsense to speak about the German music. But what is the German music capital? As we are much closer to Paris and Amsterdam and Brussels, we always were thinking in the European context, and not in a German or German speaking, because that's the market definition of German speaking territory. Yeah, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. But yeah, it's sometimes good to be like more the hidden, not the champion, but like in the hidden position to develop things, better, more sustainable, and then when people then come back after 5 or 10 years, they see, oh wow, this is really something. This is good, let's come back.
I can go back to South by Southwest. It grew so much that people don't even want to visit. A lot of people who loved the festival for what it was.
I mean, the good thing I love about digital archives is every year around March I get my galleries from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and I was often in Austin for South by Southwest between the late 10s, like between 2009 and 2014, and a whole area which I was always passing through, on my way to the city, which was like a residential area. It's not existing anymore. It's full of skyscrapers. Someone sent me a picture last year, and we're just talking about a period of 10 years.
Crazy.
It's like a completely different city, and it's like, whoa, okay. That's crazy, really crazy. I only know these pictures, that kind of development from China. I haven't seen that in the United States. It's incredible, and it's not for good, because we all know why the city of Austin has developed like that, taxes and blah blah blah. The whole spirit is gone. So it's like
That's what I meant. That if a city grows in a sustainable rhythm and the festivals don't, it's not necessarily sustainable if something becomes the center of attention of the whole world for 5 years. And everybody goes. Seattle went through that thing in the 90s, or Bristol went through a phase where everybody was moving there, or Amsterdam or Barcelona. That has a centrifugation effect, that a city loses its identity, and in the end there's this whole feeling of disappointment, and it was promising, and popular narratives tend to degenerate into a dissatisfaction. So
to stay in that picture, Cologne never promised anything or too much. That's the good thing of that coin, the good side of that coin I was mentioning.
I think I moved here after in 2010, and the choice was also based on the fact that nothing's going to explode, and I had spent time in Barcelona and Amsterdam before that, and I had seen how fast a city can change to not being able to relate to it, or to have a living outside your work and your own bubble, where you walk through a city and it feels like you're visiting somewhere. So I think that is a good analogy about what's sustainable in a city or in a social context like a conference, that if something becomes 10 times bigger in 2 years, it's not necessarily going to sustainably stay there. And artists have that problem. They become too successful. They do 2 years of touring, and then suddenly there's a huge breaking point when then they cannot adjust to a tour that has less profit, and there's not the audience for that sustainably. So it can have a challenge from a business perspective.
Absolutely.
So what are you going to focus on this year at Siopop and the convention?
We will talk precisely about what does political change means or can mean for our industry, especially when it comes to funds. Because we all know if the tendency goes like it is, projected, especially in the Eastern German countries, we will have a stronger influence of the right wings in legislation. That also means they can decide what will be funded and what will be not funded. And speaking about that, because I'm very, I have my ear very close to that developments, it's going to be insane and crazy if it comes like that. So something like Siopop will not be funded then anymore on the long tail. If
Because it doesn't fit a pattern of projecting a national identity to give an abstract idea, or because it doesn't support only content that is German-based, where we have...
It's even weirder. I mean, I was listening to an audition hearing of the Kulturausschuss in Sachsen. And that works like this. That's on national government, local government, even Cologne government. Each party can name someone as an expert and comes to that hearing. So let's say the Green Party asks you, are you coming and telling your perspective. Okay. So the AfD brought someone in, a guy who called himself a composer, and that was nuts, it was nuts. He was just talking insane things. I first thought it was comedy, but then it was like, no, this guy is for real, To make a long story short, he said, if no one's listened to your music, then your music isn't good. Then you should be a professional musician. I did 1,000 compositions. I did it all by myself. I'm a super successful guy. At the end, you don't know who he was or what he did, but he was just like this self-made attitude. Whatever he composes, we don't know. But only the narrative. If no one's listened to your music isn't good.
Which, to put it constructively, which I don't want to, is if something's not commercially viable, it has no reason to exist.
Exactly.
Which is a form of censorship based on profit-oriented thinking.
Yeah. And if you break that down to funding structures, you know where we end up.
That only the things that are commercially viable.
That's the commercial part. Then we have, of course, the diversity part, et cetera, et cetera. So
marginalized groups would be excluded by default from that.
So we're going to discuss that as well. What could happen if, So our thing is be prepared, prepare ourselves to be more resilient for that situation.
This is kind of like a wake-up call that things won't. We have to accept that what we thought was given in society might be gone one day. Yeah. The US being an example of shock treatment happening fast. I have lived a big part of my life in Greece, and I saw what happened there. And what happened to artists and structures, and people always celebrate the few exceptions that do exceptional art as a reaction to social pressure, but that doesn't mean that whole communities and artistic generations get lost in. It's the same problem in education and in health. If you make health something that is completely only profit-oriented, then it's a very different concept than keeping everyone alive, and we socially agree that we do so. So we are entering, based on what you're saying, a time where the live music venues, for example, have started a fund, a solidarity fund for each other, which is already an indication that there's an expectation that funding for live venues might go down. So I mean, there's movement in society in that direction.
Absolutely, because that would also be one important presentation. There is in Cologne there will be something. It's called the Club Euro. It's an extra added euro on the ticket price, which then goes into a foundation, which should fund the smaller and small venues. That only works if the big ones also
agree to be part of it.
And now there's a lot of discussions going on with the owners of the big agencies in Cologne, also with the Lanxess Arena, etc., etc. We will have that ready for CO Pop. There will be a presentation about the Club Euro, how it works, and when it starts. That would be a milestone, especially because there was also initiatives on a national level to realize that, which is super complicated, because
Absolutely.
You can imagine a venue in Bavaria giving funds for a venue in Hamburg,
or Leipzig, Dresden,
whatever. But in Cologne, and that's another good thing about Cologne, we can make it happen. It's possible to speak that the smallest venue speaks to the biggest venue in a moderated way. Thanks to the Clubcom here in Cologne, we have like a strong lobby for that. So that will be also a topic at the CO Pop convention. And another one is also, it's a very political but aesthetically question. I mean, in my opinion, or it's just a question I will ask. It's something I can see in the music industry right now is there is not that much provocation anymore. I mean, if the provocation comes from the right wing side. I mean, they test the barriers step by step in social media. You know, how far can they go? You know, and they go even further. And I can't see anything from the other side, so to say, whatever the other side means, you know. But there is, we have, of course, a lot of empowerment thing, especially female rap. That's good, but like aesthetically radical is no things in view for me.
There's no edge, you mean,
No.
or no movements that have
But
push boundaries.
Yeah, but if you look at other art specters like the theater, there you have a lot more provocation, inspiration, radicalism in art, but that's a closed ecosystem. It doesn't have to mingle with the public as the popular culture has to do. So we're going to discuss that on stage.
So if artists kind of aesthetically self-censor or don't try to push boundaries to get to a point of popularity, or why that happens.
Or just to like danced on the question, do we need more punk in our culture, you know? And we're going to discuss that with the head of the Cologne Schauspiel, Kai Boges, the new guy since last year, who did very, very radical things in Vienna when he was there. And with the singer of the band Team Scheiße, which is a very good punk band in my opinion.
I don't know them, but the name is indicative.
Yeah. And with our festival director Elke Kuhn. So it's like, it's a kind of self-reflecting thing, which I think we need to talk about that, you know. Also, on the one hand, like the fundings and the budgets, and you know, and to make the system more resilient. On the other hand, the artistically approach, you know.
Then the antibiotics to the reaction to, and what kind of like will go on the forefront of pushing boundaries back. Art has always a way to react to times, so it's really interesting that you address both the effect of going into a little darker times, if not very dark times, and both on a financing level, on a political level, and on the other hand, easy listening pop might not be the soundtrack for this phase, to put it mildly.
I mean, we all know that was always the case. In bad times, people escape more. The escapism is more popular than the confrontation, you know. But knowing that, it's like just a question of, okay, but why is it in other art genres more popular to be more, you know, confrontative, but not in music right now. So that's an interesting question, so to say.
I have a story that's linked to the microphones we use. Not this, but a particular one. But the founder of AKG, which was an Austrian company, I read an article that for me was one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever heard. They were discussing that after the war, people will need to watch films to forget all the horrors and the hard times, so they're going to need microphones to record sounds. And the company was based on the notion that recovery and escapism is the basis for why the industry will work. And it shocks me that someone had such a clear understanding of where the industry was going and decided to make a microphone to document that. And that's an example in a post-war situation of how clear that is to the people who made movies, to the people who make the equipment. And it's interesting to see that art can be both enlightening and heart-opening, and also a numbing factor, or a commodity. And both are valid, but the thing is that it's interesting to see in our times where this is going.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a completely different topic now, but I was, for a while, I was very into the history of elevator music and Musak, and that was also invented to make people more fearless, using elevators and, what kind of music they know they need to calm down, like something which they can't remember after they use the elevator, elevator music. The guy who invented it came from the military side. It's interesting, So it's like, it's a bit similar to what you just said. I mean, sometimes what we see always is music has a power. Whatever we use it for, what use. But I think we need more. It's time for more confrontational pictures in pop culture. Music is one part of that, but otherwise others use that confrontational pictures and take over. That's my fear.
Very interesting. So the sustainability of the industry in an oversimplified way at the moment has to do with preparing for changes, both on a financial and political level, and actually embracing confrontation and an art form or expression that is designed to be like a social intervention as much as it is an aesthetic experience. So where's the balance and what times do we live in? I was in Minnesota before everything happened, and I've been watching what the community and the artistic community is doing there, and it's really interesting how fundamental that was. The events were to the music scene having a very provocative role, like playing all night to keep agents awake. And it's interesting to see how a community can very fast go into more provocative art forms or as a form of protest. So it's interesting to see how times can affect a community or artistic segments to go into a more proactive stance towards things. And I think that's where theater is interesting, because ancient Greeks called theater is the psychotherapist, where people can experience the pain and maybe it's also the time for healing or processing the conflicts that are coming, that allows other art forms to address it faster. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think that's going to be a very interesting talk, and we all live for a few decades in our lives, and most of us have not experienced the whole circle of events. Like people who were 60 in the 1970s had seen 2 world wars, build-ups, destruction, and maybe it's interesting for us as a generation of people to see how much can go even back in some steps of progress, and how we navigate that then as a group and artists. Thank you for coming. We talked about things in a very system thinking oriented way, distributed, but I think I sense that the intent you have this year for the conference is very relevant to our times, and I hope that both the audience and the people who attend get inspired and also see the power in what we all love, which is music and the social effect of it. So the dates for CO Pop this year are...
The festival is from 15th to 19th of April, and the CO Pop convention is 16th and 17th of April.
So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Ralph, for taking time while planning this festival. And I hope this gave people an interesting insight on how much thought and actually humanity goes into just building up a conference that has both a business and entertaining aspect. What I keep from this, especially since in our industry we talk a lot about audience development, is that it takes a lot of effort to really understand every new generation of people. And I'll keep that as a part of constantly both educating the audience, but also keeping an open mind that every generation has different habits and needs, and keep that into consideration. And I'll stop complaining at conferences that I'm bored, because not every session is for me. I'm referring to that feeling where you go to a conference and there's this moment of disappointment. And I will embrace it more, because it might be an opportunity to see what other people need, because it's not designed for me as a user or as a person. And thank you. That gave me personally food for thought.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So, see you at Pop.
Yeah, see you.